Hello and welcome to Monkey Knife Fight Live. We are excited to be here, folks, and today we're going to break down the NBA Finals Game 1 and the best picks and plays across Monkey Knife Fight. Joined today by Nick Whalen and Noor Zainab. Folks, Giannis, what's going on? I'm hearing that he's not going to play. Obviously, we don't see him on Monkey Knife Fight, so that's a huge factor. One of the MVPs of the league, two-time MVP. What are we hearing out of Wisconsin, Nick? What's going on?
Well, believe it or not, I have not been in touch with Giannis's team directly. But like you said, it looks like he's not going to play. He's officially listed as doubtful on the injury report, which is kind of the best piece of information that we have right now. Giannis hasn't really spoken about his condition. Bud was asked about it a couple times during his media availability and basically dismissed it. It's really unclear if this is going to be a Kawhi, round 3 situation where he's just perpetually doubtful for every game, but maybe has a much more severe injury than we actually, know about. With Giannis, it does seem like there's a chance that he comes back, maybe not tonight, but at some point in the series. I mean, there was that Chris Haynes report prior to Game 6 against Atlanta that implied that had that series gone to a Game 7, we may have seen Giannis in that game. So reading between the lines, it seems like he is close. But, Milwaukee, I think, is going to go into this one at Phoenix in kind of a feel-out mode where, assuming Giannis doesn't play in this game, if you somehow win, then you're playing with house money. Then you can maybe have the luxury to not even play him in Game 2. Just assume that you'll take the split and head back to Milwaukee. And the other benefit there is you have 2 days off between Game 2 and Game 3 on Sunday. So I think Milwaukee's hoping that they could find a way, Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton play well again. They could find a way to steal this one. And then you can kind of handle it game to game from there.
Well, Nick, you said the big word in sports, right? If they can pull it off. And I mean, Giannis combined for 80 points in those 2 games this season. Obviously, the Suns winning the first one in February, 125, 124. And then in April, 128, 127 in overtime. And he combined for 80 points. Noor, how do you see those 80 points not being on the floor? And how do you see the Suns being able to take advantage of that heading into tonight?
I think the fact that if you look at those games too, the fact that they both were lost by 1 point for the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis wasn't there for the second game for the OT, it kind of bodes well for Milwaukee, I want to say. Like if he's not there, if they've had to do this before and you have to rely on Giannis to drop 80 points and you still lost by 1 point, I don't know. Like I know on paper it sounds good for the Phoenix Suns because you're not going to have Giannis. They're not going to have the 2-time MVP. But the Bucks do have shooters. They do have people who come through, and we've seen them in the regular season. So I think it's going to be a lot closer than people expect.
Well, speaking of shooters, I mean, Devin Booker, when he shoots 42% or better, the Suns they're undefeated this postseason. The guy's just been going off and consistent as can be. We look at the first Monkey Knife Fight, the featured more or less contest, if Jason wants to pull that up for us. And we see Booker coming in at 28.5 points, and Chris Middleton, that line started at 25.5, but now up to 27.5. So as Nick said, will Middleton have that big game? Nick, what do you think? Why has Middleton's line gone up overnight?
Well, I think part of it is how he played in Game 6. That third quarter, especially where he essentially put Milwaukee on his back and carried them into the NBA Finals. I think he's riding a pretty significant wave of momentum right now, but it doesn't erase the fact that he has been pretty anemic throughout these playoffs, especially round 2 against Brooklyn. I thought he was really disappointing even in Game 4, the game where Milwaukee lost Giannis against Atlanta. For as great of a scorer as he's proven he can be, there are still times where he just kind of tends to no-show, and you never know when those games are going to pop up. So, for me, I was already kind of iffy on that line when it was sitting at 25.5. Now that it's up to 27.5, I feel like I'm inclined to go under, even though, as we've seen the last 2 games, Chris Middleton is kind of the number 1 guy who inherits a lot of those possessions that would typically be used by Giannis.
Noor, how do you see that contest? I mean, you got the more or the less. Obviously, Nick's leaning towards the less side of things. Where are you? I see the smile coming on your face. It looks like you got something ready for us here.
I think if obviously it was for Giannis, I would say there's no way. I think Middleton usually relies on being the second scorer. You've seen that usually how he plays with Giannis on the floor. He kind of waits for his moment to come through. Usually it's a little bit later than it's supposed to be, like Nick mentioned, but he did come through for the Hawks when Giannis wasn't there. And you saw how he carried, just like Nick said. And I think that just because it's going to be the first game, it's kind of going to be a feel out game. He's not really going to be able to assert himself the way that he's supposed to, because like I said, he gains momentum a little bit later on. Once he's used to the opponent, he understands what the plays will be thrown at him and what his good spots are. I think by then, if Giannis is still not available, I might give him that edge. But 27 right now looks really good for Middleton. I can't give that to him. I'm sorry.
So no on the 28. So we're all three of us actually. I don't see Chris Middleton, just the way the Suns possess the basketball and the way they're so good at not turning the ball over. I don't see those fast breaks, and I just don't see him being able to attack the paint and get inside to get those 28 points. So I think all three of us are pretty comfortable with the less. But now we're going over to the book show. No. Wrong one. There you go, Jason. Less on Middleton. Now we're going to talk Devin Booker. And yeah, I'm going to take more on Devin Booker. Personally, we've seen him drop 40 points. We saw Stephen A. Smith compare him to Kobe Bryant. Now, I'm not going to talk about Stephen A. Smith, but that's a pretty hefty comparison from somebody that's been around the sporting game and the league of basketball, the NBA, pardon me, for a fair amount of his career. Now, where do you think – we're going to throw this to you first here, Nor. Where do you think that Devin Booker comes in tonight, and how do you think he performs in game one? He's at home. How do you think this goes?
I think from what we've seen Devin Booker in this series is he's a different animal in the playoffs. We saw him in the regular season. He does what he does. And when he gets to the stage, he almost has that lever that LeBron does, right? Like he can bring it on whenever he needs to. And what did set him back was his injury. I do think that space that they've had between waiting to see what was going to happen with Trey and Giannis was a big factor in maybe waiting to see how that would heal. And if that has healed correctly, I think it's going to be a good game for him, because if you've noticed his past series as well, like besides the Nuggets, he's always had really, really good game ones, always. And he always asserts himself. So he's at home. It's NBA finals. He's got the point guard by his side. I'm going to go over.
Nick, the Bucks defense has looked really, really good. That's all the hype that I'm hearing up and above Milwaukee in Canada. Can that defense shut down Devin Booker in game one? Can they hold him to less than 28.5 points?
You know, hats off to the guys at Monkey Knife Fight who set this number, because I think it's spot on. I think Nora made a lot of good points, specifically that he's had some really good game ones so far in these playoffs. I mean, you look at game one, round one against the Lakers, he goes for 34, 7, and 8, dominated that game from start to finish. Didn't play on paper all that well against Denver in game one and round two, but that was a game that Phoenix won by 17 points. A lot of the role players stepped up. They didn't really need Devin Booker to score all that much in that game. In fact, he only took 12 shots. So it wasn't really a bad game. It was just, a blowout type of scenario for most of the second half. And then against the Clippers, goes for 40, 13, and 11, his first career triple-double in that one. So he has a history already of starting these series strong. We talked about how Chris Middleton tends to ease into games and even ease into series. I think that's totally right. Like some of those explosive quarters that he's had have come in the second half of games when he has a chance to feel out who's guarding him, what's available, what's not. We see the opposite with Devin Booker. I mean, he wants to come out and score 25 in the first quarter if he can. So I think we see a very aggressive Devin Booker tonight. And even though the Bucks are the best defense right now in the NBA playoffs, on paper, they have some nice matchups. Chris Middleton profiles as a guy who should be able to guard Booker. Drew Holiday certainly can guard him. We saw the same thing, or we said the same thing about Trae Young in the last round. And if Trae Young doesn't get hurt, I mean, I think that's a completely different storyline. But, Drew Holiday got cooked routinely by Trae Young early in that series. And I think Devin Booker, presents a lot more size. He's a lot more physical. He can get to the line just like Trae Young. So even though on paper it feels like the Bucks should be able to match up pretty well, you still have to execute it at the end of the day. And for the most part in the modern NBA, really good offense tends to beat really good defense.
Well, there it is. For all the MKFers paying attention, make sure you lock those in, because that's 3 analysts going with Devin Booker more and 3 analysts going with Chris Middleton next, or less, pardon me.
Fade them all.
So make sure you lock that in. And remember, for the NBA playoffs tonight, the payout for the more or less contest is 3.6 times, which is absolutely great. And you can select your buy-in too. So we got Jason to scroll down there. Look at all the different options you have, from $2 all the way up to $1,000. So whatever you're comfortable with. I mean, you got 3 studs going with all the same picks, so I think you should be pretty comfortable. Now, moving into the next contest, we got a 3. We're going to go for a 5 times, more or less again. We're talking 3-way. It's DeAndre Ayton, it's Chris Middleton, and it's Chris Paul. We just talked about it. Next one, Jason. It's okay. We're going to give Jason a minute here. Oh, I actually think you might have just been. Oh, no, you weren't. Well, it's okay. Well, bringing it up. See, getting into Devin Booker's points, and I think this is a huge thing, is going to be, can Ayton get those boards? Can he get those offensive boards and kick it back out to CP3 and Booker? And Ayton's line right now for rebounds is 11.5. So to go more from that, we're going to need 12 rebounds. Nick, you're the guy that we just talked about. Milwaukee's defense, do you think that Ayton will be able to get the 12 boards against that solid defense?
It's certainly a possibility, although I think I lean under on this one right now. Milwaukee, unlike that Clippers team in the Western Conference Finals, at least has some guys who can pull DeAndre Ayton away from the basket. He's not going to be able to camp out essentially in the restricted area and just kind of wait to contest shots or guard guys back to the basket like Ivica Zubac or even DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, Brook Lopez is a legitimate 3-point spacer at the center position, and somebody who, unlike some of the other centers who can shoot threes and do it occasionally, like he prefers to shoot threes. Like it is a 3-point shooter first. And if you twist his arm and he has to go in the post and go 14 of 18 and lead the Bucks to like 30 points in the paint in the first quarter, he's proven that he could do that, but he would prefer not to. So it kind of depends to me what Brook Lopez we see in game one. Does he come out and look like the Brook Lopez from game 5? If in that case, he's probably not going 14 of 18 again, and there would be, in theory, a lot of available rebounds for DeAndre Ayton. But if he's pulling Ayton away from the basket and it's more of a gang rebounding kind of mindset for the Suns, then I worry about it. And we have to mention Milwaukee is the best rebounding team in the playoffs in terms of both offensive and defensive rebounding rate. They're way up there. They're number 1 in defensive rebounding rate. So, a lot of those uncontested boards that a lot of big guys tend to get, those aren't really there against Milwaukee. I don't see DeAndre Ayton getting to like 17 rebounds like he did the other night, or 22 like he had in game 4 against the Clippers. If he does go over, I think it's 12 or 13 boards at most. But I'm inclined to take the under tonight.
Nor, how do you see DeAndre Ayton stacking up in game 1 against, obviously, as we heard from Nick, that unbelievably solid attack on the glass that the Bucks present?
I love DeAndre Ayton. I think he's one of the gems of Phoenix Suns. What he's been doing recently has been amazing. He's going to be a star in the coming. And but do I think he's going to get 12 rebounds tonight? Probably not, just because it's the same thing again, right? Like he's going to be feeling it out. He's going to be seeing how the matchups are against him, given the fact that, yes, the Suns have gone through lengthy teams. They've had to go through pretty much Forest as they were coming through to get to the finals. So I think he does have some experience when it comes to overcoming other defenders and overcoming larger defenders, especially. But I just think that given the fact that it's the first game, I don't know if he's going to be able to get 12 rebounds tonight, just because he had been averaging 10, 11 in general. But I think if you give him 1 or 2 more games, he could have a good rebounding game here too. He could be making historic numbers as well.
Yeah, well, he's averaging just under 12 boards this postseason, right at 11.8. But I have to go back to Nick's point tonight. I really think the fact that the Bucks are just so good on the glass, and I think if he's going to see any opportunities, it's going to be off of missed Booker and missed Paul shots. And I just don't see that happening too much either. So I'm going to have to take less on DeAndre Ayton as well on the rebounds. I'm glad we're getting a little spicy here, though, because now we're back to Chris Middleton. We already mentioned that. So now we're getting things spiced up. It's time to talk about Chris Paul. What does CP3 do in game 1 to stand off the page? Now, Nor, your eyes just lit up as soon as I said CP3. So we're going to throw this bone to you and just let you run with it. He's averaging 8.7 rebounds per game this postseason, or assists, pardon me. Yeah. His line is 9.5 assists. Does he go more? Does he go less in game 1? What do you think, Nor?
I think a lot of this is going to rely on the fact that whether or not Booker is going to be able to make those shots that he's missed in the past couple of games, just because given the injury extent and everything, if he's able to come through and he's able to be the Booker that we've seen early in the series, 100%. It's the point God. He's known to pass and chuck dimes the way that you're just never going to see it coming. And the thing also with Chris Paul is the way that he plays the game is, he's not going to give you a special scoring night unless that is required from him, unless that's the last person that's supposed to be coming through and give you the numbers. Like that's just what his deal has to be at that point. But other than that, what his job is to make sure that he's the engine of the court. He is delegating the ball, he's creating space, and he's giving the guy assists, and he's getting his people going. And when you have that mentality, your mentality is to assist and it's to help your players. And when you do that, you're gonna be averaging 8 points or 9 assists a series. This is how it's going to be. And I think given the fact that it's his first finals run currently, and it's also against the Milwaukee Bucks, a team that could have probably traded for him last season. Chris Paul is amazing when he's been poked and when he has an agenda to go after. So he's gonna be a player to watch out for tonight.
Well, certainly one of the better players of our generation for sure. And he's played for so many different teams. So I think that's a very valid point that he could have ended up in Milwaukee. Nick, you're our guy there. You're in Wisconsin. Tell me what's up. What do you think Chris Paul does tonight?
I think it's very possible he goes over that number in terms of assists. I mean, it's a little bit worrisome that he didn't top it in any of those final 3 games against the Clippers. But as Noor alluded to, we saw a little bit more of an aggressive Chris Paul in terms of, scoring over those last few games. I think he, did a little bit less of the classic kind of distributing that we're used to seeing from Chris Paul and tried to take matters into his own hands. Didn't work out all that well in games 4 or 5 when he kind of struggled from the field, but then it all came together in that final closeout game. And he's essentially the reason that went from being like a 7 or 8 point game to all of a sudden a complete blowout midway through the fourth quarter. So the question is, do we see that version of Chris Paul for the entire finals? We've never seen him in a finals before. Does he do the LeBron approach where it's, the first 2 games are feel outs, he scores maybe low 20s, but then turns it on later on? Or do we see that he had, has waited his entire life to get to this moment and gives us, 6 or 7 games where he's taking 20 shots and trying to get 30 plus points? The thing with Chris Paul, though, is he's going to play a ton of minutes. And even if he's scoring 30 points, he's still going to have a chance to get 9 or 10 assists virtually every night. But ultimately what it comes down to is whether the Suns role players and Devin Booker are hitting their open threes. I mean, they were at 35% as a team against the Clippers. They were at 43% against Denver in round 2. And that's when Chris Paul had a 15 assist game. He had an 11 assist game. That's the easiest way for a point guard to pick up assists, is just kind of, toss the ball to the wing or skip the ball to the corner and you hit a quick 3. That counts as an assist. Same as throwing an alley-oop to DeAndre Ayton. That's a little bit more difficult to pull off. So, if Jay Crowder is hot, if Dario Saric is hot, if Cam Johnson is hot, and Chris Paul is the one who's driving in and kicking to those guys for open looks, then I think the assists could pile up pretty quickly. So I'm inclined to go over on this one.
Well, Nick, to your point, right? When Booker is shooting more than 42%, we said it earlier in the show, the Suns are undefeated. And why would CP3 be dishing the ball to him? I think you have to go more on this just because of the passion in the air. And, when you talk about this game 1 final, the big story heading in is CP3. For a lot of the fans, it is, now that we know that Giannis isn't going to play, it is CP3. It's his first final. It's what's he going to do? And I don't think it's going to be a quiet game 1. I really don't. But if you go to that second contest there, our next contest, which is the rapid fire contest, if Jason wants to take us there, you match up Chris Paul, and he's going toe-to-toe with Drew Holiday in assists. Now, Drew Holiday, for my money, has been one of the most, if not the most consistent Milwaukee Buck this postseason. He's shown up to play every game, and he's passed the eye test, at least for me. I think he's been solid. Can he out-duel Chris Paul in the assist department tonight? Nick, I saw you giving a little shrug there to that comment. What do you think could possibly happen there?
Well, I disagree a little bit that he's passed the eye test. I think Drew Holiday has had some pretty tough games throughout these playoffs, and he was amazing in games 5 and 6 against Atlanta. So he's riding great momentum into this NBA Finals series. I think he had his best game of the playoffs. I mean, 27, 9, 9, 4 steals, 2 blocks, did have 6 turnovers in that game, but he comes in with a ton of momentum. But I was disappointed, frankly, with what we saw from him earlier in the Atlanta series and honestly for most of the Brooklyn series. And I know, he's expending so much energy on defense and he brings so much value there that doesn't show up in the box score. I mean, he's not a guy that you're going to go get like 5 steals every single game. It's the little things that he does defensively. And you have to factor that in. But I thought, like, for the most part, his shot selection has been just kind of off the wall. He's just played like very un-Drew Holiday-like basketball for like 70% of these playoffs, where he's taken a lot of like one-on-one step back mid-range jumpers. Like, the reason you brought in Drew Holiday was to not be Eric Bledsoe. And it felt like he was doing this like bizarre Eric Bledsoe impression at times. And he's been good enough to pull them through. And obviously he stepped up big time in games 5 and 6. But I still worry about the lack of consistency there. With all that said, you're getting plus 1.5 in terms of comparing his assist total to Chris Paul's tonight. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And
Okay.
Jason's just roasting me right now based on what you're saying. I got my counterpoint, but yes, it is 1.5 assists, right?
Okay. So with that in mind, Drew Holiday averaged more assists per game over his last 4 than Chris Paul did over his last 4. And of course, Chris Paul missed the first 2 against the Clippers. Without Giannis out there, the Bucks are certainly not a better team. I don't think anyone would say that, but you do at least have the ability to put 5 shooters out there. With Giannis being the obvious weak point from a shooting perspective, they're able to spread things out. The ball's in Drew Holiday's hands more. The defense has to respect every single player out there. And that's led, I think, to more driving lanes for Holiday and more assist opportunities. Now, much like the Suns, the Bucks actually have to hit shots. I mean, Kevin Pelton of ESPN had a really good point on a podcast over the weekend. He mentioned that the Bucks are the worst 3-point shooting team in the playoffs since the 2004 Detroit Pistons, who shot like 28 or 29% from 3. Milwaukee's down to 31% from 3 as a team. And most teams that shoot that poorly don't even make it out of round 1. And even fewer make it out of round 2. Even fewer make it all the way to the NBA Finals. Like it's pretty much unprecedented for a team to be this bad from 3, take as many threes as the Bucks are taking, miss as many as they are, and make it this far. So, one argument for that is, well, they're just not a good shooting team anymore. They lost a lot of the pieces over these last couple of years that made them such a dangerous team. The other side of that is maybe they're long overdue for a great shooting series. And we see something like that, 2014 Spurs Heat, where, San Antonio had kind of slogged their way through the playoffs. And then all of a sudden, Danny Green's hitting everything. Manu Ginobili is hitting everything. Patty Mills is hitting everything. Like that's in the cards for Milwaukee, but you're going to need some kind of otherworldly performances from the Bryn Forbes and the Pat Connaughtons of the world.
Well, Nor, what do you think? Where do you think that matchup goes? Because you seemed really high on Chris Paul before. He does have that disadvantage with the 1.5 assists in hand for Holiday. Do you think Chris Paul can cover that?
It's Chris Paul, dude. Of course. I think
love it. Confidence is so key.
I think I don't want to roast you either, but like the fact that there was this meme that I saw on Twitter and it was like the Bucks went and tried to get someone to replace Bledsoe, but all they did was like got someone with a toothpick instead and it called it Drew Holiday, and that's literally all that happened. And I'm like, that's so true. Like I think he like Nick said, like he has been really good on defense, but the way that he was supposed to delegate and come through shooting, we have not seen that. And I think the biggest part of this matchup too is if you look at the agenda, right? Like last year we had rumors about all these other teams who were making a run for CP3. Bucks being one of the bigger ones because they needed that role filled. And then they went ahead and they got Drew Holiday. And I think just knowing that that's kind of the vendetta that Chris Paul was going to have, I think he's going to make Drew Holiday look like a fool. Like I think Drew Holiday's going to be going around circles on the court, and I'm going to go with Chris Paul.
In the assist category. So you think he's going to just undress them in one-on-one play, or in the assist category specifically?
In the assist category, sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, Nick, what do you have to
I have one final counterpoint.
There it is. Let's hear it, Nick, because honestly, you said it too. And that's what I was feeling. I was watching Drew Holiday come into this and he's looking hot. Without Giannis on the floor, he's going to have the ball in his hands. So Nick, tell me something here, because I look at this and I see Chris Paul needs 2 full more assists than Drew Holiday, who's going to have the ball in his hands an awful lot tonight to win that matchup. Where are you thinking here? Because we know what Nor knows. We know okay. Nor.
I think it's fully possible that Chris Paul outplays Drew Holiday. In fact, if we could somehow bet on whatever metric that is, I would say that probably happens. But I think they're within 1 assist of each other because, I mean, Drew Holiday has 43 assists over the last 4 games. Giannis played in 2 of those games, or basically 1.5 of those games. So it's more than just like this tiny sample at this point. And obviously it's a new matchup against Phoenix, but even for the playoffs, if you dig real deep on NBA.com/stats, you could go find potential assists. Chris Paul and Drew Holiday are both sitting at 15.1 potential assists per game for the playoffs. So, in terms of comparing those, they're as even as can be. That tells me that it's just going to come down to which team can hit more shots. And, ultimately that does probably lead me towards Phoenix. They're the team that has, a Cam Johnson type. Like Milwaukee would love to employ Cam Johnson. He would play like 27 minutes a night for the Milwaukee Bucks, but they just don't have those guys. At the same time, I think Drew Holiday is the player who is a little bit better at like getting to the rim and, doing those quick little dump offs to Brook Lopez for a dunk. It felt like Brook Lopez had like 45 alley-oop dunks in games 5 and 6 against Atlanta. So, I think Phoenix has the slight advantage in terms of role players being able to knock down threes. I think Milwaukee has the advantage in terms of, role players being able to finish around the rim. I mean, they finished in the restricted area and in the paint at a just crazy rate throughout the playoffs.
Well, again, I'm actually gonna go with your 30%, Nick. You said he doesn't show up for 70% of the time this playoff. I think Drew Holiday has a good game. You said the sample size without Giannis on the floor. I think that 1.5 assists is going to be huge. So I'm gonna lean with Drew Holiday. We know that Nora's going with Chris Paul, so we got a little. I like that little back and
See you
forth
guys
already.
next week when I win, no problem.
Perfect. I love that. I absolutely love that. But there is still the one big thing of the game needing to be played. So I will hold you to that, Nor. I'll see you next week. Now, for the next matchup, we got Devin Booker. We have Chris Middleton. For me, I'm going to actually just throw this one to you guys because, Nor, what do you think of the Devin Booker versus Chris Middleton matchup? I think it's Booker, and that's that. It's points. 1.5 points is the spread. Yes, we just so the followers, just so all our MKFers out there just know, so they can feel safe when they go and click on Devin Booker's name. With only 1.5, like Middleton only has 1.5 points in hand.
If you're listening to this today, you have my blessing to go with Devin Booker next to Middleton. I promise you'll be fine. I'm gonna go with Booker. I think he's the number one option for the Suns. He is a superstar in the making. He has this Kobe mentality that you haven't seen before. You put him next to Chris Middleton, I'm sorry, like it's not gonna work that way. And just given the fact that for Chris, like as we mentioned before, it's even if he does hype up, even if he does fire up and his shooting form takes off, it's not going to happen until he's comfortable. And we don't know when that comfort is going to happen. I just don't think it's going to be game one. It might happen later on. And let's say Giannis does come back later on. Middleton will not be the first guy then, right? Like he's going to go resort back to being the number 2 option and doing everything else that he's been doing. But I think currently at the moment, as how it is, and given the fact that Booker might be back healthy, and this is their finals run, this is what they need to be here for. I'm going to give it to Booker. It's Booker.
Nick, Booker, Chris Middleton. How do you see it?
It's Booker. I mean, we talked a lot about this at the top. I mean, Noor just kind of reiterated a lot of those great points that she made early on. To me, like the 1.5 doesn't really matter here as much as it does when you're talking assists, just because those are a little bit harder to come by. I mean, that's basically one basket that could decide this. And, I think there's a good chance Chris Middleton scores in the high 20s, but I just don't see him, having 30+ point potential in this game. And I think Devin Booker absolutely does. And, one thing we haven't really touched on, and I tend not to try to buy too much into like narrative type of elements, but Phoenix is at home. That's been an incredible crowd throughout this entire playoffs. They've had a nice break since the end of their series. Milwaukee just got into Phoenix, last night. It's going to be an environment that is very conducive to the Suns going on runs throughout this game. And if Booker comes out and hits a few shots early and the crowd starts to ride that wave, I think he could really take off. And we could see him go for 30, 35 in game one. I think the biggest point that we've made overall is that Chris Middleton does tend to settle into games, and that he has the ability to go for 23 in the third quarter and kind of wrap it up and outscore Devin Booker. But that's not someone you can count on game to game for that kind of eruption to happen. And if he's sitting on like 8 points in the first half and Devin Booker is sitting on 18 points in the first half, I think that's kind of how this game ends up going. And I think I would trust Devin Booker to close that out over the final 2 quarters.
Well, for Middleton to just get 3 or 4 straight threes in the third quarter, just to get like neck and neck with Booker in the third.
Right. This prop will not be safe at all. Like even if Booker is like 10 points up on him going into the third, you're not going to feel great about it because we've seen Middleton do it a couple times.
Well, yeah, 20 points in the fourth quarter. We've literally seen that happen.
Right, exactly.
I think it's more so that Jason just wants to see us sweat a bit, and that's what that's all about.
Yeah,
that's what it is. But Jason, just so our Monkey Knife fighters can know at home, if you could just scroll out. So the rapid fire contest does pay out at 3 times. And again, you have a boatload of opportunities and options on Monkey Knife Fight to place your pick. All you have to do is select your buy-in. You can see your prize amount there. Scroll down, hit submit, and you're in to win. The real question is, are you riding with the boys and Drew Holiday, or are you going with Nor and the point god, Chris Paul? Now, we've talked about the ins and outs and the players. Let's get down to game one, because it is game one and somebody has to win. Nor, You seem high on the Suns. They're on home court. Nick just brought up the best point that we haven't really touched on is the home court advantage. How much do you think that plays into game one tonight?
Oh, massively, hugely in every way. I don't know if you guys have been, I'm sure you have been watching the other series with the Bucks. But I'm sorry, Nick, but like the Bucks crowd, it's like a library. It's quiet. Like no one's really tuned into it. It's really, really, it's not the atmosphere that you would think is happening for a playoff game. And then we've seen what's happening with the Phoenix Suns, how the audience there is completely just erratic about the fact that it's their first finals appearance in a long, long time. And they're doing it through Chris Paul, through Devin Booker. And I think the bigger thing about, like Nick said, we don't want to play into that, but just given how this season has gone over in the past season as well, with no fans in the audience, I think it makes a huge impact now. And we've seen, like, I'm a Toronto Raptor fan. I'm a fan of Siakam. I've seen how fans completely just change the trajectory of a player as he's playing, right? Like that feeds into how your game goes and what kind of level that you're going to be at as you're going through it. Especially if you're a player like Devin Booker and Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton and stuff. So I think given those factors, for sure, like being at home, being in, having the crowd next to you, having Booker come back healed a little bit. Thanks, Jason. Having Booker come back healed a little bit, and having Chris Paul finally get his moment in the finals and being this game in game one. I think game one is just going to be a big game for the Suns to win. Moving forward, I don't know how long it's going to take. I can't tell you how long the season is going to go. I can see it going 6-7. It could go all the way through. But I think the first game is going to be the Chris Paul and the Suns game.
Nick, it looked like you took a little bit of offense to the quiet Milwaukee fans. Wow. Just a touch. I mean, what do you have to say to silence Noor and the Suns coming into game one here?
I'm a little more offended that Noor, referred to the crowd as an audience. This is not a play. This is an NBA basketball game. They're not an audience. It's fans. It's the crowd.
Let me have it. Sorry.
You're not.
You guys
totally
are lucky.
Wrong.
We still don't even have those up in Canada yet. So just be thankful. Be thankful.
I forget what they're called. See, it's been 2 years. I have no idea what they're called anymore.
No, you're not wrong. Early in the playoffs, I had actually heard the same thing from people who went to games and were disappointed by. Especially early on, kind of a late arriving crowd, late arriving after halftime, just people not going as crazy as they should. So you're not totally wrong. I think that changes in the finals. However, I think that Bucks fans are just too nervous. Like nobody wants to fully buy in. You're too nervous to let yourself believe that this team is actually going to do something good. But I think breaking through to the finals is enough. So you're not wrong. The Suns crowd has been fantastic since game one, round one against the Lakers, and it is going to be a factor tonight. If we're talking about just how this game goes or who we're picking, I'm picking the Suns. I think the spread is up to like 6 or 7 points. That's kind of right where I'd start to consider, maybe the Bucks covering, but I like the Suns to win this game outright. I think everything is going their way. The other team is without its best player. That's the number one thing by far. But Phoenix has played really well throughout these playoffs. I think they've been, even with some minor hiccups against the Clippers, they've probably been the most consistent team throughout the entire playoffs. At one point they were just reeling off win after win after win over pretty decent quality opponents. I think Milwaukee, as they've shown these last 2 games, can still put up a fight without Giannis. But, even if Giannis was fully healthy, this series to me would be a total toss-up. I could see either team winning in 6 or 7. But then, you subtract Giannis from the equation. Phoenix is going to show, I think, that they are a considerably better opponent than the Atlanta Hawks were.
I think the big difference is just how Phoenix possesses the ball. They're smart. They take their time. Chris Paul wants to be there. And they don't turn it over all that much. So those quick rushes where the Bucks really capitalize, we're not going to see that. I think the Bucks are going to dominate on the glass, as you alluded to, Nick. But I'm taking Phoenix game one as well. Monkey Knife Fighters, make sure you place in your bets. Lock them in. You heard from some great minds. Obviously, Noor and Nick, myself, not so much. It's all going down tonight. Game one, the land of the rising sun. It's the Phoenix Suns hosting the Milwaukee Bucks. Thank you so much for tuning in to Monkey Knife Fight Live.